Hello, everyone. Welcome to NTA305. Modernize your web applications and API services using App Runner. Modernization is often lengthier and it's hard, right? We all know that. In today's session, we are going to talk about some of the strategies with which you can simplify your modernization journey by adapting to improving your operations efficiency, reducing your DevOps workloads, and also optimizing your expenses for your operations using AWS App Runner. I am Prakash Srinivasan. I'm a solutions architect at AWS. I'm happy to be presenting this session along with Abhishek, who will be walking us through some of those use cases, and Raj will take us through some of those migration paths in achieving an efficient modernization journey. Let's get this started. In today's agenda, I want to start with highlighting some of the key challenges customers find while they were actually going through those modernization. And I will also talk about how App Runner is helping in this space to reduce and optimize these challenges for you. I will also help you to identify when to use App Runner and when it is the ideal choice for you. And then we will also cover about the scenarios in the day in life of a customer persona. And we will also walk you through how the migration paths will be looking like, along with some of those next steps you can potentially take from there. Let me talk about why modernization, right? And I would like to start with a quick poll here. Please raise your hand if you have thought about modernization whenever there was an increase in demand for your application. Awesome. I see quite a few hands here. Yes, it is the most important thing which actually drives you towards modernization. Customers think about modernization when there is an increase in demand for your application, which resonates back with increase in customer base as well as the usage. Improve resiliencies and performance, right? This often goes in hand with increase in demand. Whenever you see there's an increase in demand and you want to move towards the modernization, always think about how you can improve your performance and efficiency. And modernization can address that very effectively for you. Reduce technical debt. You might have often built a lot of technical debt, often built during your complete life cycle of your software life cycle. And modernization gives you a great opportunity to look at them and reduce them using some of the cloud services like serverless technologies, where you can often start small, increase it, grow gradually, and then bring in more agility to your application architecture. While you're achieving these things, it is also important to consider operations and infrastructure costs, because they can actually be significant when you move towards migrations and modernization, and it is highly important for us to factor in and understand how modernization can help you to solve these problems for you. Customers choose modernization when they are looking for a progressive transformation of their application as well as infrastructure. Now you understood why modernization is necessary, right? And I also talk about the benefits of it. Easier said than done, isn't it? But when you actually plan to move towards modernization and kickstart your activities, you may encounter some of the key challenges on your way. Here I'm actually going to highlight them, and I'll help you to understand what are the nuances to that. And knowing them well upfront is really important for us to move towards a successful modernization. I want to take a quick poll again. Think about the scenarios where you have actually faced resistance or a reluctance when you decided to move forward with your modernization efforts and initiatives. I see a lot of hands. Yeah. I'm not alone, right? So do we. So it's very common, and I'm actually going to go through them here. What inertia in terms of modernization is, it actually refers to any of the reluctance or resistance you may encounter during this journey. Identifying them and addressing them well upfront is really important for you to have a successful modernization journey. To start with, cultural inertia, what it really means, right? Because this is one of the prominent areas where we have seen the inertia, and what it really means is, with the people within the organization, they are used to do things with the way in which they have been doing for a very long time. And they have well-established processes and workflows, which is really working for them for what they are using it today. However, for modernization, there is a need for you to think about other technologies and other tools with which you can efficiently improve the productivity for the people and in turn for the business outcomes as well. You can often overcome this inertia by having a clear leadership communications, strong commitment towards a change management, and as well as a top-down leadership commitment as well. Organizations often can be risk-averse. This is primarily to do with the change they are trying to bring in to adapt to new ways of doing things and as well as adapting to new tools and technologies. Primarily, this comes based upon the fear of potentially bringing in any disruptions or failures to the business process, which is really working right now. Identifying them and planning to mitigate those risks during your migrations planning as well as the modernization planning is very important. Organizations often use legacy systems that are deeply ingrained with their operations. And moving away or migrating away from these legacy systems often attracts some kind of a resistance, primarily due to concerns with data migrations, capability issues, and what kind of a business process workflows changes it brings in. Legacy systems are often considered as reliable and stable. However, they are mostly outdated. Lack of skills and expertise. We have seen with the customers, there is a huge portion of inertia for modernization comes from a lack of skills and expertise to implement your modernization projects. Your team is efficient and then using existing technologies and tools to run the systems for today. However, if they have to look forward to implement any of the modernization projects, it is highly important for us to upskill the requirements, upskill the skills and capabilities of your team. The last one is the budget constraint. Modernization attracts a significant financial investment. And I have seen customers facing more challenge in securing the budget for your modernization initiatives, and you may face a reluctance from your finance team to move forward. This happens mostly when you clearly cannot define what is the return on investment is going to look like for the business for today as well as for the future. By addressing these areas upfront and planning to mitigate them in an efficient way gives you a smoother and modern way of developing your applications and services. Right. Now, I spoke about those inertia, but today's discussion is mostly about how to build the momentum as a catalyst to bring in a successful modernization journey for you. These are broadly classified into three main areas. The first one is infrastructure simplification. Think about how you can actually reduce the complexities of infrastructure management from your developers and help them to focus most on writing codes that solves your business problems. This actually gives back a lot of time to developers' lifecycle of managing their applications. which in turn contributes back to writing code for solving your business problems. With efficient modernization, you can bring in a streamlined process of delivering modern applications by utilizing a scalable, secure, and automated containers. With the rapid deployment strategy, you can actually make those containers up and running within minutes, and you can expose them to your production cycles. By listening to customers who have gone through this journey, and as well as by learning from various architectures implementing this modernization, we wanted to simplify these catalysts for you. AWS App Runner is a highly abstracted, simplified, and fully managed web service for you, so through which you can actually host and run web applications. You can simply point your code repository or just give your containers, and App Runner will be able to run them in a production-ready manner. It's easy to use. You can start with simply pointing out to the container repository, the code repository, and tell when to do the deployments. You also have options to specify when your applications should auto-scale. Optionally, you can also specify what are the build instructions that are required if you're giving a source repository. And also, you can tell how to monitor the health check of your applications. As a result, App Runner is going to give you a secure URL, which is actually running your production-grade applications. Let me highlight some of the key benefits, what you get by moving towards App Runner. The foremost thing is increasing the productivity of your application development cycle. With enhanced containerizations and simplified modernization techniques, what App Runner brings you, now your developers can just focus on innovations, and rest of the running applications are being done through App Runner. It is secure by design. It gives you an automated deployment, as well as encryptions and load balancing. For organizations that are risk-averse, it is very less daunting because now they are dealing with the less configurations, and there is less room for any errors or misconfigurations. With the flexible deployments, you can actually bring in a lower environment that is more closer to a production environment, and you can quickly deploy it and see how it is actually working out for you. And as soon as you have done your testing, you can reduce it to run it with just minimum instance, or even you can pause. So you don't have to think about any of the over-provisioning you are going to bring in for this. Thinking about observability, it is very important for us to observe the application's behavior and performance of your app from the day one. App Runner gives you an integrated observability features with which you can start monitoring your application's behavior and performance by integrating with some of their cloud-native services like a CloudWatch metrics and logs. And it also helps you to troubleshoot the issues because it gives an integrated feature to work with AWS X-Ray. And in turn, this is going to improve the customer experience. Considering about the costing, App Runner gives you a granular pricing where you just pay for the requests. So even when you're starting from the scratch, you don't have to think about any of the over-provisioning or any of the risks associated with that. Now we spoke about, now we learned about what are the benefits it brings in. Now I want to highlight some of the key areas where App Runner is the ideal choice. App Runner is the best fit for running your web applications, backend or front-end APIs, basically any application that works with a HTTP request and response model. It also helps you to move fast because with little to no experience on containerization or even infrastructure management, you can start using App Runner. It's best fit for any of those applications that are all required to run for a longer time and also supposed to handle multiple requests simultaneously. It is unlike Lambda, where you have a single invocation serving single request, and then it exists. App Runner also gives you the benefit of reducing the capacity down to one instance. So if there is a need for you to meet the price, to meet the performance, you can start using those capabilities for you. The application must be stateless, where the state of the application is not preserved anywhere on the desks. And if you have any of the stateful applications that needs to be run in a simplified manner, you can leverage on any of the other services where you can move the state to databases or data stores and still run the application using App Runner. App Runner can securely communicate with the other AWS services, and you can bring in these architectures in a decoupled way. Now, I want to talk about where App Runner might not be the right fit for you. If you have any of the background jobs running or any of the batch jobs, App Runner is not the right fit. This is why, because App Runner works based on the context of a request. So as soon as you get a request, it is able to create the resources and spin it up and make it available for you to run it. And these background jobs or batch jobs are often beyond those scope. So for such scenarios, think about decoupling such modules and leverage on other cloud-native services, run those background jobs there, and the applications in App Runner can still communicate securely to those services and still complete the task for you. App Runner is best fit for interactive jobs, and that needs to always be on. And anything for event-driven jobs, think about Lambda. And you can even orchestrate them using services like step functions. If your application needs to have a kernel-level access, App Runner being a fully managed service, it's not the right fit for you. And App Runner supports several runtimes. When you bring in your container code repositories pointing out to the App Runner, for runtimes like a Java or Python, it can build the container image for you and then running it for you. However, if you see any of those runtimes that are all not yet supported, you can still bring in them as a container image and then give it to App Runner. It is going to do the same job for you. With this, let me invite Abhishek to cover some of the common use cases and how customer personas a day in life will look like before and after App Runner.
Thank you so much, Prakash. So we learned so much, right? And what we learned so far. So we learned about why application modernization is necessary in your organization. We also talked about the inertia for the modernization and some of the challenges that you get as an organization to move into the modernization path. We also talked about how App Runner can help remediate those challenges that you face currently in your organization in terms of application modernization, and some of the key benefits of App Runner, where it can be a good fit or it cannot be a good fit. So in my talk, I'm going to talk about 3 use cases based on 3 different personas within your organization, which you can relate with. And we'll talk about those use cases, and we'll walk through a journey of the architecture. How does it look like before App Runner, or once you deploy an application on top of App Runner? So let's get started. So I'm a developer, and my question, and these are the common use cases that we hear from our customers, and we are trying to bring it for you. As a developer, how can I modernize my application to quickly adapt to the evolving needs of my customers? So quick poll here, how many of you have been a developer, are currently a developer, or have worked as a developer in the past? Oh, I see so many hands, even I've been a developer in the past. So I hope you'll be able to relate with this question. So let's look at the day before architecture. If you look into this architecture, you'll be able to relate with what Prakash mentioned about legacy systems, legacy application architectures. So we are bringing two flavors of that architecture. If you see, we are talking about containers where your application, language runtime, container orchestrations, operating systems, and you also have application deployed on a virtual machine. So as a developer, our customer demands keep changing. I have to rapidly deploy our code to production, how I can seamlessly deploy my containers, how I can seamlessly deploy my applications for our business outcomes. I have to work with the infrastructure team to set up the infrastructure, to test in a lower environment. I have to work with the infrastructure team to work on the configuration for the load balancer. I have to also provision environments as needed for different application deployments. And I have to also work manually on configuring the other scalability features. Sometimes we also over-provision our resources because we don't know what the demands looks like. So these are some of the challenges Prakash highlighted, which you can see in this architecture. And as a developer, my focus should be on developing a code that can meet the current customer demand and also future demands. How I can scale my application to meet the future demands. How I can build my application so that it caters to the different line of business in the future. So let's look into how the day after looks like when the same developer uses App Runner to deploy their code. So if you look at the GitHub, right? So you can build your own source code into the GitHub repository, and App Runner will take care of building that code and deploying it as a service on AWS. So you don't have to worry about building that code because App Runner will take care of all the undifferentiated heavy lifting for you. And you can just focus yourself on building the code as a developer. Now, there's another scenario. What if I already have a container, as you saw in the day before? So you can still bring your own container, and App Runner will take care of deploying it and running it as an application. If you see the customer responsibility that you see in this architecture, as a customer, now you will be only worried about managing your applications. And AWS will take care of all the heavy lifting. When I said AWS, I would like to focus more on the App Runner over here because App Runner will take care of all managing the language runtime, containers, and hypervisors, et cetera. The other important thing that you see in this architecture is the continuous integration and continuous deployment. As a developer, my focus is how soon I can move my code into production seamlessly and testing across different environments and fix those challenges that I identify in the code. So AWS App Runner will take care of if you make a commit into the code into a repository, App Runner will take the latest code and deploy it. If you push a new version of container image into a container repository, App Runner will take care of deploying the latest version of the container on the App Runner runtime as an application. So you'll again focus more as a developer on developing innovative code for your organization, and App Runner will take care of all the heavy lifting for you and all the management behind it. Also, as you saw in the day before, you have to work with the infrastructure team in managing the infrastructure of your organization, patching those servers. Now you don't have to worry about that because App Runner will take care of that. So now we talked about developer. What about other persona, right? So you saw the 2B architecture using App Runner. So awesome. My application is famous. Now I don't have to worry about underlying infrastructure. Now my application is very famous because I'm able to deploy my application very fast. Now, the next question from the DevOps team will be, OK, developer, now how I can efficiently scale my application to handle a growing demand while maintaining a high level of security. So the focus from DevOps persona will be handling the future demand of the customers and also the security, right? We already talked about the developer part, so we're talking about sec and ops over here. How many of you, a quick poll here, how many of you have performed as a DevSecOps professional or planning to be in future role or currently in the role? See a few hands. So does this resonate with your current needs of the organization? I see the nods. So let's look into the DevSecOps persona over here. So this similar architecture over here. If you look into the scaling part, right? Since we are talking about the scaling of the application, so you have to perform manual scaling of the application as a day before. As a DevSecOps professional, you have to create complex scanning solutions for all the resources that you manage in your infrastructure. It can be custom, it can be complex, and difficult to maintain. And you have to always keep on changing it based on the customer needs. Certificates. You have to manually manage all your certificates. Either it's a public certificates or private certificates that you are using. You have to worry about when those certificate renewals are coming up. You have to worry about procuring new certificates, purchasing new certificates, deploying those new certificates. And many of times we have heard from the customer that it can also lead to a production downtime because the certificates expired. So it's a very complex job as a DevOps professional in the day before life over here. Now, if you're invoking any other services in this architecture, like any other services or any other API endpoints, you have to also think about securing those endpoints so that there is no exploitation, there is no hacking, right? So you have to make sure the integration between other services is highly secured or encrypted. And also you have to think about traceability. End-to-end request and response are tracked, and you get all the data points so that you can make uniform decisions based on those data points. It can be in terms of latency, it can be in terms of cost optimization, it can be in terms of optimizing your code for better performance. So you have to build this traceability, which can be a very cumbersome approach. So let's look into the day after, right? As a DevSecOps professional, if I use App Runner, what will be my responsibility here? So let's focus on the concurrency and auto-scaling over here. If you look into concurrency and auto-scaling, as Prakash mentioned about the scalability of App Runner. So the way App Runner works is you define the number of concurrent requests for the App Runner, and once that concurrent request threshold has achieved, it will scale up the new instance of the App Runner instance. So you define those, and it will automatically scale your App Runner instances based on the configuration that you set. So you don't have to manually go and scale up your applications. Again, in terms of customer responsibility and AWS responsibility, you have to just make sure your applications, you have to manage your application, and AWS will take care of the security responsibility of your application in terms of, let's talk about TLS as you see in this architecture. So AWS will provide the traffic in transit is encrypted using TLS, which is a fully managed service, without any major setup needed. For workload isolation, if you see on Firecracker, you can provide a multiple level of isolation in your workload using a micro VM, and it also provides multiple levels of protection as well. From AWS security services, using AWS KMS, you can protect your images that you have stored in the repository or the code that you store in the repository at rest using AWS key management services, or you can also use customer-provided keys. So KMS is a fully managed service, so again, you don't have to worry about managing those keys because KMS will manage it for you. IAM, Identity Center. It enables you to set up the users, access, roles, policies in your AWS account, as well as on the resources that you're using within App Runner. You also manage the resources being invoked through App Runner, any other API calls being happening. So you need access to those API invocations. You manage all those credentials in the IAM Identity Center. If you remember in the day before, we talked about endpoint protection. VPC endpoint provides you that endpoint protection in your integration of AWS App Runner with any other AWS services. Suppose you are calling an API from App Runner and through another AWS services, which is hosted in a VPC. The VPC endpoint makes sure that the traffic between App Runner and the other AWS service never leaves the traffic, never leaves the private network that we have within Amazon. So it will not be traversed over the internet, and it will be protected using TLS. And also, we have something called AWS Private Link, which enables this functionality. AWS CloudTrail. How many of you are familiar with CloudTrail? Nice. So the CloudTrail provide you audit logs and reports. So the request that you received in App Runner, the response that you send back from App Runner, everything is audited and streamed into CloudWatch logs. In addition to that, if you have any other downstream API calls, that will be audited in the CloudTrail as well. What help does it bring for you? So you'll be able to see which IP address the request is coming from, what we responded back. You can identify anomalies and track the IPs. And you can publish a dashboard and make uniform decisions based on the data that you get in the CloudTrail. The next is ACM, which is AWS Certificate Manager. So in the day before, you learned about how difficult it is to manage the certificates because it requires a lot of manual intervention. But AWS Certificate Manager enables you to provision, deploy certificates, which are public as well as private. You can request the certificate through the ACM portal, and you don't have to worry about the renewals of those certificates because ACM will take care of managing the renewals of those certificates. You can also request a certificate from Amazon for your AWS resources, or you can also request for public and private certificate through the portal that we have. So you don't have to worry about managing the overall certificates as a DevSecOps professional. So the complexity of your job has been reduced, and you can focus on more innovative work within your task. So let's look at from the operations perspective. We talked about developers. We talked about DevSecOps. Let's talk about operations. So how many of you are from the operations sides of the things? Anyone? Just one hand. So as an operational professional, right, how I can efficiently monitor my application and use application metrics to optimize my cost. So as an operation person, you have to think about metrics. Based on that metrics, you have to identify the cost savings, how you can optimize your cost. So looking at the day before architecture, and now you are very much familiar with this architecture. So most of the current architecture in the day before is based on the capital expenditure model. So you buy your infrastructure as a hardware, and you do upfront investment in your infrastructure, and you tend to provision those resources, over-provision your resources because you don't know what the demands look like in the future. And also, you have to build a complex resource monitoring system to monitor your resources that you have deployed in your infrastructure. It can be very complex because if you have a legacy application system, then you have to worry about different monitoring system that you have to maintain as well as an operation person. And also, you have to do a lot of firefighting in terms of short-term diagnostic of your applications. So now, let's take a look at how the day after looks like when you deploy your application on App Runner from operations persona. So as Prakash mentioned earlier, from pricing, you pay for the compute that scales with the request, right? So the App Runner monitors the number of concurrent requests that you receive, and then based on the concurrent requests, it identifies if that threshold has been reached, then it scales the new instance of that application. And you only pay for those specific scale-up instances. And as soon as the requests get reduced, then the number of instances gets scaled down, and you don't pay for it. So you only pay for the compute that scales with your request. Lower environment closer to the production. Many a times, as an operation team, you have to think about the cost and how you can rapidly create a new environment to test out your application in a lower environment like staging, which is mimicking your production environment. Again, if you look into the day before architecture, it was more towards, again, you have to work with the infrastructure team to provision a new environment, and then you have to start creating and configuring resources that you need in that environment. But using App Runner, you can rapidly create a lower environment which mimics production, and you can test out your changes in that lower environment which mimics production. And once your testing is completed, you can scale down that environment, and you don't pay for the resources of that environment. So, and when I say you don't have to pay for the resources, is the minimal cost for seldom used services. Means that it is based on pause and resume scenario. So you pause that environment for the time that you don't need it, and you don't pay for any resources for that. It also ties back to the eliminate cold starts. App Runner will make sure your resources are pre-warmed. So you don't have to think about any latency issues that may be caused if a new request comes into your environment. So this will significantly reduce the latency issues because it already has the pre-warmed resources in your environment. The next emphasis is on the automated deployments. As I told earlier, that App Runner provides you an ability to rapidly build your code if you commit new changes in your code repository and deploy it, or if there is a new version of the container image is available, it will push those changes and deploy in ECR and make sure your service is up and running. From observability perspective, App Runner provides you the observability suite of tools to integrate with any other AWS services, like Amazon CloudWatch. I know that I asked the question on CloudTrail. How many of you are familiar on the CloudWatch? Significant. Thank you. So Amazon CloudWatch, what App Runner does it takes all the data that based on the number of requests, response, the API calls, and other downstream API calls that is on the app data, application data, performance data is being streamed into the CloudWatch. And the CloudWatch, you can build the dashboard, take necessary actions, identify performance bottlenecks, and make corrective actions in your organization. Similarly, if you have a use case where you are building a code and you would like to notify your department if the code build phase, failed, then you can utilize Amazon Event Bridge, which can build an event-driven architecture for you. So as soon as your code build failed, it can integrate with other AWS services like AWS Lambda, Amazon SNS to notify the department so that they can take necessary and corrective actions why the build failed. And this is one of the use cases. Similarly, you can implement multiple use cases within Amazon Event Bridge. I already talked about the CloudTrail. Again, it provides you the audit log activities so that you can take corrective actions based on where the request is coming from, what time you receive the request, what time we send the request, what are the other users and activities happening within your environment. The other important point over here is the AWS X-Ray. What AWS X-Ray provides you is its end-to-end traceability of the request and the response. If you also have any downstream API calls to any databases on any other AWS services, it can drill down to that level as well and provides you end-to-end traceability. And then X-Ray provides you the tools to build a dashboard or build an X-Ray where you can identify any bottlenecks, you can identify any performance issue, and look for opportunities in optimizing your end-to-end request and response scenario. So now let me invite Raj. Raj is going to talk about the migration path for AWS App Runner.
Thanks, Abhishek. Isn't that exciting? So far, we have actually seen the different advantages of App Runner And we have also seen how it can simplify the life of different personas, be it developers, DevSecOps, or operations folks. So now you may ask the question, how do I migrate to App Runner? And that is what we are going to cover in this next section of this talk. So for this, we are going to look at two specific scenarios. So scenario one is where you have a relatively simple application that you have, which you want to move to App Runner, in which case you directly connect to App Runner. You can connect your source code or container image to App Runner, and you just deploy it. However, in the scenario two, what we observe is a typical enterprise application is a monolith and quite complex. So by monolith, what I mean is an application or a system where the complete functionality has to be deployed all together, even if you have them as distributed components. So that is what I mean by monolith. So for such a scenario, what we have seen is that for many of our enterprise customers, they have found success when they take a two-step approach. So the approach to take there is to first migrate your application to AWS and then talk about modernization. And we will just go through step by step how such a journey would look like for you. So talking about lift and shift, the advantage of lift and shift is that you are able to take the benefits of cloud immediately. You are able to get efficiencies by meeting your scaling needs immediately, achieving efficiency, and also obtaining cost optimizations. It's a fairly easy task to migrate to the cloud. We have services like Application Migration Service, which is part of our Migration Hub, that you can use to quickly move your application to the cloud. So once your application is running in the cloud, you may want to further monitor your application and then further right-size your application so that you can obtain cost optimization. One other thing that we also advise here is to look at our managed services that we have, like our managed database service or Amazon RDS, and this is going to reduce your operational overhead. Typically, when you are deploying an application in the cloud, we recommend that you deploy it across multiple availability zones. By doing so, you are improving the high availability and resilience of your applications. So now that you have migrated your application to the cloud, and you have also worked on some simple-to-use optimizations, this is a good step for you to now think about refactoring and modernizing your application. So for this, we recommend a pattern called Strangler Fig pattern from Martin Fowler, in which you incrementally move parts of your application to the new system. So you still have your monolith, however, you incrementally move parts of it to run on the side of the monolith, thus incrementally refactoring and modernizing your application. So let us take an example here. Let's say you have an application with different business capabilities like customers, sales, and marketing. So what you can do is that you can start by carving out parts of this application and have them run on the App Runner. You can then use API Gateway to route the APIs to the right compute underneath. So this is all good so far, but what if you have tens or hundreds of these smaller microservices that you are running? You may have many different teams that are actually servicing these microservices. Think of Amazon.com. So that is where we recommend that you look at our multi-account architecture. So in the multi-account architecture, you start to group some of these microservices based upon your business capabilities into accounts. By having this multi-account architecture, you are able to establish the governance, control, and properly manage your application. You may be thinking that, oh, that all looks good, but it looks like quite a bit of work, right? Think about all the networking, routing that you have to do to make that happen. So that is where we recommend the refactor spaces from Migration Hub, which will simplify this for you. Refactor spaces environment provides the infrastructure. It actually provides the multi-account networking and routing so that you can still have this application, which may be in different stages, being serviced by the original monolith and a subset of microservices. And towards the end of the journey, you'll probably end up with a whole bunch of microservices. And refactor spaces is going to help you simplify that process and also help you with routing, networking, and other capabilities. So with refactor spaces, you are able to reduce the time to set up and manage your refactor environment. You are able to shield your end consumers of this from any infrastructure changes. And you are also able to easily reroute the traffic from the old to the new application. So this is something we strongly recommend that you consider in your migration journey. So hope you got a chance to learn a lot today on how you can simplify your modernization journey using AWS services like App Runner. So for rest of your stay here at reInvent, we have a whole bunch of other sessions on this topic. So please scan those QR codes. We have both sessions and hands-on workshops that can help you. Thanks a lot for joining us today. I think that brings us to the end of the session. And we hope you have a really good evening and a great reInvent week.
Happy reInvent, everyone.
Thank you.